This is the Rivian R2, and it's the upcoming new entry-level Rivian SUV. While pricing for the full-size Rivian R1S SUV starts above $75,000, pricing for this will start closer to $45,000. And it's smaller too, although it keeps the same distinctive Rivian styling. Today, I'm going to take you on a thorough tour of the new Rivian R2 and show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. So far, Cars and Bids has sold almost $500 million worth of cars, all sorts of special, interesting stuff like this, and this, and this, and this. So, if you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car, do it at carsandbids.com. All right, time for the quirks and features of the new Rivian R2. And I'm going to start with an overview, sort of the basics. So, you can think of the R2 as kind of a scaled down, more affordable, entry-level model compared to the full-size Rivian R1S. Think of it as like the R1S is like the Tesla Model X, and the R2 is like the Model Y. To illustrate that, the Rivian R1S is 200.8 inches long. The R2 is about 185 inches long, so over a foot shorter, and that sizing makes the R2 almost exactly the same size as the Tesla Model Y. So you can see about where it's going to fit into the lineup. And pricing is similar too. Rivian says this will start right around $45,000 for a base model R2. That's a big discount compared to the $75,000 plus base price of the R1S, but it's quite similar to the Tesla Model Y, which also starts right around 45 grand. As for production, Rivian says the R2 will go on sale sometime in the first half of 26, so about a year and a half from now, which means it's still pretty far out, and this is a very early pre-production model, so I'm not going to get behind the wheel and drive it, but instead I'll take you on a thorough tour of the quirks and features. So we climb inside the R2, and the first thing you notice in here is that the interior has this sort of cool, sporty, adventurous, minimalist kind of vibe to it all around. Those are the words that I would use to describe it. Maybe most interestingly, it has a very similar look to the interior of the R1S, which is pretty impressive given the price point differences between the two vehicles. This really does feel sort of like a baby R1S at a more reasonably affordable price tag. And there's a lot of cool stuff in here. For example, you have a glove box over on the passenger side. You can open up for storage, of course, but you also have another glove box in the center of the dashboard at the bottom. You can open up for even more storage. And if that's not enough, you have this pull-out storage tray at the base of the center console where you can, of course, put more stuff to store it. And you can pop out some cup holders at the top of the center console for your drinks, or you can push them back into the center console and keep them safe there so they're not cluttering up your minimalist interior. Other cool storage items, you have this surface here in the center console is a wireless cell phone charging pad. You put your phone here and it charges. And there's also this little kind of ridge in front of the charging pad where you could stick your phone if you wanted to keep it elevated while you're driving or sitting in the car for whatever reason. Of course, you also have center console storage. You lift up the armrest and there's more storage in there. So a lot of cool storage solutions inside the R2. And there's even more on the door panel, which is pretty cool. You have your normal door pocket, which here is quite large for various items, but then above that, you have another little storage pocket right next to kind of the door pull where you can put even more stuff. And one other hidden storage feature, inside the door right here, you can see, well, a flashlight. Push this, it pops out, and then you have a flashlight that you can take with you to shine your way around. Of course, put it back inside the door for more flashlight safekeeping. Interestingly, Rivian told me this flashlight is one of the very few parts that's shared with the R1S. Despite the similar look between the two vehicles, they don't really do parts sharing. You don't have major stuff like the hood or the doors. There might be some brackets and fasteners that are shared, but overall, this is a completely different vehicle, minus the flashlight. Also worth pointing out, on the door, you can see instead of a handle that you pull to open the door and get out, you have a little button, the car to door open. You press that, and that electronically pops the door open, and you can climb out. Now, one major change compared to the R1S inside the R2 is the whole sort of cockpit steering wheel area, which is subtly different, but certainly different. Let's start with the stalks coming off the steering column. You can see on the left side, your turn signal stalk also includes windshield wiper and headlight functionality. That's also true in the R1S, but the overall design and look of this stalk is completely different. And you go over to the other side, and this is your gear selector stalk. You put it in park, reverse, neutral, drive. You also control your driver assist technology here, sort of the following distance and turning on driver assist. And that too is kind of a different switch and a different look than what you have in the other Rivian models. Probably more obvious to Rivian owners, another big difference is the steering wheel itself, where you have these two kind of discs on the sides, these wheels, if you will. These wheels provide controls for various items inside the infotainment screen. Various functionality is controlled with these little discs. Now, this particular car being so pre-production, I can't show you all the stuff that they do, but this demo gives you an idea of exactly how these operate. They can scroll up, they can scroll down, and you can even move them left or right to tap on different things, select different stuff, whatever it is you might want. So these discs, I guess, are going to replace more traditional controls in Rivian models, and you can see how they're usable and how they work here. Frankly, I think they look cool and they feel nice when you're actually using them to select or change things, at least in this demo. And since we're talking tech, let's talk screens in the R2. As you can see, you get two screens here, a large center infotainment screen and a gauge cluster screen. We'll start there. The gauge cluster screen provides sort of your basic information. As you can see, kind of the gear you're in, if doors are open, your current range, charge level. If you're driving, it'll show your speed. All your sort of direct basic vehicle information is on this screen. Now, other Rivian models have this gauge screen, but in the R2, it's smaller. It's sort of a little bit shorter in height, and Rivian says that will increase visibility out over the steering wheel a little bit since you don't have to look over that screen. Now, the central infotainment screen is where everything happens in this vehicle. And again, this is a very pre-production car, so a lot of the stuff in this infotainment screen isn't full functionality yet, but you kind of get the basics. It's a touch screen, it's very responsive, quite large, very high quality display, as you can see, and you adjust everything here from your climate control, your heated seats, to navigation, the radio, your drive modes. All of your vehicle controls are essentially integrated into this central infotainment screen. Now, one especially cool feature about the R2, Rivian knows their customers have sort of an adventure-y, off-road, outdoor lifestyle focus, and so there's an entire area on this screen devoted just to camping and camping features, and there are some cool ones. For instance, Camp Courtesy will turn off your exterior lighting, so when you walk up to the car at night on a campsite, it doesn't turn on all the lights and wake everybody up. It provides, well, campsite courtesy, like it says. There's also a feature called Super Dark. If you turn that on, the screens go dark, except the infotainment screen shows some sort of basic information with this red glow. Not the bright infotainment lighting that would keep you awake, but sort of the basics and kind of this dimmed red vibe, which looks pretty cool. And another very neat feature, this control for the powered tent. Rivian will apparently offer an accessory power tent for the R2, and they told me it's possible that you may be able to make tent adjustments in the infotainment screen, like for the temperature, as you can see, or tent lighting. That may not make production, they said, but right now it's a cool concept idea, and I gotta admit, it's a neat thought that you could change the air temperature or turn on the lights of your tent from inside your car. For obvious reasons, it could be really helpful. In fact, you might be surprised to learn that when it comes to the R2, a surprisingly large amount of thought went into camping and off-road adventuring. For example, the rear seats fold down, the cargo area, of course, is flat, and Rivian told me they've measured and they made absolutely certain that a 95th percentile height male could lay flat inside the car and sleep car camping inside the R2. The original thought was also to have fold flat front seats, but that won't be in the production vehicle. But even with just the rear seats folding and the flat surface it creates, you can sleep inside your Rivian if you want to. But in case you want to use the back seat in your Rivian to, well, just sit back here, you of course can do that as well. And frankly, you can do it pretty easily because it's surprisingly roomy in the back of this car. Despite the smaller size compared to the larger R1S, this is actually pretty decent for rear seat space for knees and legs and headroom and hip room. You can see my knees are a little tight against the front seat, but it's totally workable for a tall adult to sit front and rear in the R2, which is pretty impressive. And there are some nice creature comforts back here as well. You can see 2 USB-C ports on the back of the front center console, which is nice to have, and 2 more USB-C ports on the back of the front seats next to this hook for charging even more rear passenger devices. You also have climate vents back here, so rear passengers can get their own airflow, and rear heated seats, again, to add to your rear seat comfort. It's also nice to point out that because this is an electric vehicle, so it doesn't have a big drivetrain hump running through the center, the middle passenger has good foot space and leg space as well, so you really can get 3 across seated back here. There's also some nice storage options in the back, especially in the door panel, as you can see. On the bottom level, again, a big door panel storage compartment, but then there's an upper level also for even more door panel storage, and you can store more stuff in the backs of the front seats, as you can see, pretty large storage pockets here. And if you drop the center armrest, you have, well, an armrest, but also cup holders and a little cubby in front where you can stick your phone so you can have it present and looking at you while you're sitting in back. And next we move on to the back of the R2, where there are some especially cool items. The tailgate may look like a regular, normal tailgate, but the back window rolls down. The rear window comes down, power operated, as you can see. And Rivian tells me you're going to be able to operate it from your phone, which acts as a key for this car. You can roll it up or down just like all the other windows, or from the infotainment screen, there will be a little icon you can press to roll down the back window, or there will be a little button where you can actually roll down the back window when you walk up to the car and approach it, which is pretty cool. And of course, you can roll it back up using all of that stuff as well. It's power operated. This is a feature Toyota has always had on the 4Runner. Everybody loves it, but not too many other cars have implemented, but it's implemented here. Anyway, open up the tailgate. You can also open it the normal way, hinged from the top, and you can see the cargo area back here, which frankly is pretty reasonably sized. Given the overall size of the vehicle, you got good space, and because it doesn't have the teardrop shape of a lot of other electric SUVs and crossovers, it's more boxy, you have a taller space back here where you can put larger items. In case you want even more cargo storage, you can lift up the floor. You can see a lot of extra cargo storage space under here for even more stuff. And on the left and right sides, the edges of the cargo area, you can see these little pouches, which include some Rivian equipment, like a first aid kit, for example, you'd find in here, or you can just take them out and have your own storage on the sides of your cargo area. Other items worth pointing out back here, for one, you got buttons to drop the rear seats, which is a pretty cool idea. You don't often see that in 2-row vehicles. Usually it's just for the 3rd row, but that's what we got here. And by the way, worth pointing out, the R2 will be 2-row seating only. If you want that 3rd row, you gotta go R1S. Also back here, you can see power ports in the cargo area, of course, for charging devices, which is another nice and convenient feature to have. And next up, moving outside the R2, a few interesting things to discuss. For one, the charge port. This is the charge port door, which is beautifully integrated in this car. You'd never even know it's there, but Rivian tells me this is not going to be its final location. Apparently, it's going to move to the other side, and the exact positioning of it is going to change, so it won't quite look like this. But I happen to love this integration and how sort of seamless it looks on this pre-production R2. I also like this roof spoiler situation. You can see it keeps the flat roof line to look brawny and muscular, but there's this air channel that goes through like a rear spoiler. It's kind of an interesting thing to see, and it gives a little extra style to the R2 in back compared to the R1S. Although there's not a lot of major exterior design differences between the two vehicles when you have them next to each other. You can see there are various changes and differences when you look closely. and obviously the R2 does have a smaller overall look, but generally speaking, you get the same cool look that everybody loves in the R1S, but just sort of in a scaled down size in the R2, which I think is one of its main appeals, the way that it looks. It's cool, just like the R1S, and they didn't really lose anything in terms of design and style in creating a more affordable version. And next up, we move up front and under the hood, where you will find, well, not an engine, obviously, because this is fully electric. Instead, you have a fairly large storage compartment up here, in addition to all the storage you have in back. You can put stuff up here, obviously, it's a good cargo compartment, and you can even lift up the floor for extra storage underneath, just like you had in back, for even more front storage practicality. And since we're up front, also worth mentioning something else you'll see in the front of the R2, recovery hooks for off-roading, in case you get stuck and you need to be pulled out or you have to pull someone else out. Now, the R1S and the R1T also have recovery hooks, as you can see. The R2 has them as well. Apparently that will make the production vehicle. Again, this is an off-roader for adventures, and those recovery hooks help drive home that point. Although, worth pointing out, the R2 will not have the air suspension that you have in the R1 models. They can raise up to a crazy height for off-roading, clearing basically anything. It's really impressive. This won't have that feature, so if you want the air suspension, just like that third row, you're gonna have to go R1. And finally, let's talk through some R2 model range specifics. Now, because this is still 18 months away from going on sale, Rivian hasn't released that much specific information about exactly the numbers for this car. They haven't even told us the horsepower yet, but we do know that $45,000 starting price point they're aiming for, and there's going to be 3 different kind of versions. There's a single motor rear wheel drive, that's the base model, the $45,000 version, and there will also be dual motor and tri-motor versions with all-wheel drive. Obviously, they'll add the all-wheel drive off-road benefit and performance, but of course cost as well. Now, we don't know where they'll be priced or the horsepower again, but Rivian has said to expect the best version to get over 300 miles of range and do 0 to 60 in around 3 seconds, which is a tremendously impressive number, especially for a vehicle in this sort of smaller, more affordable price point segment. Now, with that said, it's also worth pointing out that the longest range version of the R1S can do over 400 miles on a single charge of range. So again, there still are some significant benefits to the R1S. If you want more range, more space, more off-road capability, more seats, the R1S has got it. But this still has the look and a lot of the same cool features and some great Rivian benefits. And so that's the Rivian R2. There's a lot to like here. Specifically, it has the same cool look as the regular Rivian with some cool technology, impressive performance numbers, and some neat quirks and features, but with more affordable pricing and more manageable sizing. And I suspect this will be a hit. I can't wait to get behind the wheel and drive the R2, but for now, there's your most thorough tour yet of its quirks and features.